And we are live on our pre-show for today's N10-008 Network Plus Study Group. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the stream. We will be getting started shortly. I got started a little late. Look, there's less than 10 minutes to go. There's now like 8 minutes to go before we get started. We'll have to get things checked here. Cameras look good. Recordings are going here. Streaming looks pretty good. It is very cloudy outside. So, in fact, let's see how the rain is looking. I'm always concerned about stability of our network connections. And it looks like most of the rain is off to the north and somewhere else. So we're in pretty good shape there, too. Let's hope that holds out just fine. It's Florida. The rain can start anytime. Hey, chat room. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. Let's get the nightstand back up. There we go. So I know what time it is. Oh, boy, we got a lot going on in the chat room. We got lots of folks checking in. Thanks for being here. Jamie says, I have no experience but want to start a career in IT. Where to start? Well, we'll talk all about that today. You're in the right place. I do have a video that's in the YouTube video description of this video on how to get a job in IT with no experience, which sort of fits your question perfectly. It is a 30-minute video. And for those of you that know me, I don't make 30-minute videos, except for the live streams. My training videos are succinct. They're short. They're very straightforward. So it's unusual for me to have a 30-minute video, but it is chock full of information. So that's why I mentioned that. It is not a waste of time. No section of that is filler in any way, shape, or form. So although it's 30 minutes long, I highly encourage you to have a look at it, where I give you my complete overview of where I think you should start in IT. Jeff's checking in from Houston, from downtown Houston. Hello. We got folks checking in from Atlanta. Trey in the chat room jumping in here with the $4.99 super chat already. We're just getting started, Trey. I haven't done anything yet. I'm just sitting here making sure things are working so far, but I thank you so much for your support. Thank you for you've kept the lights on now for the first section of this live stream, so thank you so much. We've got a lot to go through today. I've got all brand new questions from the Network Plus exam, so we will go through those. Those look good. I think, do I have my questions up yet? I don't believe that I do, so let's get our questions up. Let's launch a quiz. This is Network Plus for 2023, the June flavor. Let's skip the names, and now there's a question up on your screen. We'll come back to where that question is. Boy, that's super bright. Let's adjust some of this brightness so that it doesn't burn my retinas before we are done with the live stream. This would be under my display settings. And this is for the studio display in front of me. There we go. Turn it down just a hair, just a tad, just a wee bit, and getting through there. Trey says, with a follow-up, $1.99 super chat, Trey says, you helped me get my A+ and my Network Plus. Thank you. Well, you're welcome. Actually, you're the one that got it, but I'm more than happy to take this much, tiny bit, you can't see it on the camera, this much credit. That tiniest little bit of credit I will take because you ended up doing the hard part. So congratulations on your A+ and your Network Plus. That's always exciting to hear about too, by the way. I love hearing the stories, the success stories that come in. Charlotte is here. I need to get back to Queen City. I have not been to Charlotte in a while. I need to get back up there and get a oddly made barbecue sandwich. I don't know what the deal is with you people, but you seem to like it. I don't know why. Hello, New York. Hello. They put the slaw right on this. I don't know. It's not a thing here where I'm from. So, of course, it's weird for me. Perfectly normal if you're there. And actually quite tasty. But don't tell them I said that. That ruins the whole story if I think I liked it. And if I want good barbecue sauce, I go to South Carolina. See, now it's open. Now the wounds are open, and we can all fight about barbecue, which is a worthwhile fight. We can have an argument over exactly how to cook the brisket. Do we slice the brisket? Do we chop the brisket? How long do we cook it for? What do we put in it? Do we put the sauce in the chopped brisket? Do we put the chopped brisket aside and have a dip? See, there's all these questions. Hello, Hawaii. Thanks for checking in. St. Vincent is here. Congratulations for making the live stream. They got nothing on Kansas City, but what about Austin? And if you ask the folks in New York City, they tell you they have the best barbecue. No, they do. They seriously tell you that. And then we all laugh, and then we go back to doing whatever we were doing just then. That's always humorous. This is good. There's nothing better on the internet than a fight about barbecue. Completely subjective, no way to prove a point. All you get to do is argue. It's a waste of time, and it's so much fun. So that's sort of the internet general, isn't it? Take any topic. I've just described why nothing of this works. It's kind of how this all goes down. I like Texas barbecue. Have I ever been to Kansas City? KC-Mo? Have I ever been there for the barbecue? I don't think I have. That's one place I don't think I've made it to. So Red, we start here, by the way, in about 2 minutes. Red in the chat room says, hello, Professor Messer, watching your videos since 2020. Thank you so much. Learned a lot from the videos. I have a question. Which should I learn first, Network Plus or Security Plus? These are good questions. You go get the certification that would most match your personal career goals and objectives, which could also match what employers are asking for. So ultimately, this sort of comes down to, am I doing this to get a job? If I am doing this to get a job, what are they asking for? What are the hiring managers expecting you to have? Would they like you to have a Network Plus or Security Plus? There's your answer. It's pretty straightforward, isn't it? Now, if you have a different set of goals and objectives, this is not about getting a job, it's about doing other things, then you will need to evaluate your own goals and objectives and determine what is the next step that will get me closer towards that end. We usually will set these up and make that happen, but it's one of those where you have to set the goal so that you know how to get there. If you don't set whatever that goal is, there's no way to create that path to get you from point A to point B. And so I think a lot of people will just go find what's the most popular certification. I'll go get that one, not realizing that nobody in your geography, in your local area cares about that certification. I don't know if that's entirely possible, but that's the type of things you run into. There should be more of a personal connection to what you are doing. There should be a path. There should be a goal. There should be a strategy about it. And once you do that, then you're in really good shape. Let's make sure our viewer activity analytics are looking good. Stream health is what I want on the screen. Stream health needs to go over here. This needs to go over here. The chat needs to get out of the way. There we go, chat. There we go. Best barbecue is in John's backyard. Y'all are all invited. And we know it's good because he said y'all. Y'all are invited, which is what we say here. I always enjoy getting to California and meeting with friends. Go, hey, when'd y'all get here? And they look at me like, what did you just say? When'd y'all get here? That's not even normal talk. Like, that's exactly the way to talk. What are you talking about? That's how it works. Let's get our presentation up and running. Getting all of those ready to go. We got a lot going on here. Okay. I know. Then we can have a fight about, is it BBQ or BBQUE or barbecue spelled out? Or there's lots of fights to have. I'm more than happy to go down that road. We can absolutely do that. All right. Everything here looks good. It's top of the hour. I would like to see if I can get my presentation ready to go. That looks good. This looks good. That looks good before we start. And now I gotta do this really, really quick. I know we're at the top of the hour, but Sergio with the $19.99 super chat says, you helped me pass my A+ in 2021. Got my first IT job, the HelpDesk. I'm sysadmin now, and you just helped me pass my Network Plus 2 weeks ago. That's what I'm talking about right there. Congratulations, Sergio. Thank you for the super chat as well. And I want everybody else to look at that and say, this is why we're doing this today. This is why we tell you that there is a reason we go through this process for earning these certifications. There is a goal, there's a path, there's upward mobility, there's flexibility, there's an increase to your income. All of those things matter. And this is a path to help you get there. Nothing is one and done. There's never a single thing that will get you there. It's a combination of things, but what a good story from Sergio. Thank you for getting us started today with that one. Let's start the live stream right now. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the June 2023 Professor Messer N10-008 Network Plus study group. This is the study group where I ask you questions that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. And if you are here watching live, you can even answer the questions online. We then get to see how did we do with all of these crazy questions that we asked. And then at the second hour, once we're done with our first hour of Q&A, in the second hour, I will open up the chat room for more questions there as well. There's always something to talk about here. So we would love for you to join us. If you are here live and you would like to participate, I would love for you to be able to do that. All you have to do is pop open a new browser window and visit this URL, professormesser.com/QA. There's a question waiting for you on that screen. If you would like to use an app instead, there, of course, is an app for this. You can go to your favorite app store, and in that favorite app store, you're looking for the app called the Socrative Student app. It is the student app, not the teacher app. Go get that Socrative Student app, and you can join us if you use the room name of Professor Messer, all one word, PROFESSORMESSER. That's what we have there. Make sure you're familiar with all of those. I think this is one of those that either way works for me. Once you're in the app or once you're on that URL, there will be a question waiting for you. That question you will find asks, a security administrator would like to block Microsoft Windows file and print services on a firewall. Which of the following ports should they block? Now, if you know the answer, our standing rule is no answers in the chat room, no hints in the chat room, and you get to choose the online option of UDP 514, TCP 445, TCP 389, TCP 1720, and UDP 161. So those are the 5 different port numbers that you could have some option around. If you think you know the answer, visit that URL, professormesser.com/QA, and lock in your answer. And as I mentioned, please, no answers in the chat room, no hints in the chat room. We will come back to that question in just a moment. Thank you for being here on our live stream. Thank you for watching. If you're watching on a replay, we're so glad you were able to make time to learn all of these new topics from the N10-008. Maybe some of these are topics you already know. When we are not here doing a live stream, you can join us on our YouTube channel, professormesser.com/YouTube. Make sure you subscribe and click the bell there. And of course, we have weekly Network Plus pop quiz questions and an archive of those questions on Twitter at professormesser.com/Twitter and professormesser.com/Instagram. And of course, there's other places too. professormesser.com/Discord gets you to our Discord, for example. Just type in professormesser.com/ the name of the place you would like to find me on. And if I'm there, it will take you there. So that's also something very useful. So I have a number of different things that we need to go through today, but one that I want to focus on first before we get started is where all of this content is coming from. The Network Plus exam has a version number associated with it. The current version of the Network Plus exam is the N10-008. This is an exam that was released in September of 2021, which means that the estimated retirement date for this particular exam series is March of 2025. That means as we sit here in June of 2023, we have plenty of time to work through our studies and be able to get to the answer or beat the retirement date of March 2025. We also want to let you know that it's a single exam that you take to earn your Network Plus. That single exam is a 90-minute exam. It is a maximum of 90 questions. You might get fewer than 90 questions, but 90 is the max. And the score that you'll need to earn is a 720 that is graded on a scale from 100 to 900. Yes, it's convoluted, it's odd, it's a little bit weird, but I'm not the one that came up with the grading system. CompTIA did. The problem with this particular grading system, of course, is you really can't follow it. Questions are worth a different number of points for every question. There's no way to determine what your score is going to be until you hit the finish button. My recommendation is always, don't worry about the score. The score will work itself out at the end. We'll know whether you passed or whether you failed. What you should focus on is knowing the content from the exam objectives and then the score will work itself out with however it works. The exam itself is a combination of multiple choice questions and performance-based questions, and we will go through both types of those today. Also let you know that there is a free resource that can tell you everything you need to know for the exam. It's on the CompTIA website. It is the objectives. I have a link to that website at professormesser.com/objectives. I will be referencing those objectives quite a bit as we go through this live stream today. Of course, on my website, I have an entire Network Plus course available for you to watch for free. You don't have to download anything. It's not behind a paywall. You don't have to register. You simply visit the page on professormesser.com, or you go to the Professor Messer YouTube channel at professormesser.com/YouTube. And that's where you can watch every single minute of every single video that I've created for the Network Plus exam. They are all available for you. Some people would like an offline version of this and a set of course notes, and I have those available for purchase on my website. You can find out about those at professormesser.com/ a few things that we could have a look at there. Of course, I will have a replay of this video available immediately afterwards. There's also an audio version of this available for replay. It is in a podcast format, and if you would like to subscribe to that with your podcast listening program, simply visit this URL, professormesser.com/podcast, and you can join and add that our A+ Network Plus and or Security Plus live streams to your podcast listening program. We also have these podcasts available on your favorite streaming service. So if you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts, you can find us there. Just type in Professor Messer and it should pop up. If you would like us to be on your favorite streaming service and we're not there already, simply let me know. Hit the contact us link on my website and tell me which one you would like to have available. If you have a look at your YouTube video, usually tomorrow, you'll notice that the YouTube video description will have a bunch of timestamps that describe exactly what we did today. And that's something that can help you find what you're looking for very, very quickly. Those don't happen automatically. They happen because my marketing manager, Lori, hey, Lori, how's it going? She is watching this replay probably at 2x speed and putting in all of those timestamps for you. You can go back years on our content to find exactly what you're looking for and exactly what time during the live stream we discuss that particular topic. So make sure you take advantage of those if you're someone who needs to find something very quickly. Also, want to remind you that my Discord is available. This is a great community. There's always somebody on the Discord chatting, having a conversation, going over questions, asking questions about some of the exam objectives. And there are so many smart people out there on that Discord that are willing to help. Some people that are studying for their certifications, some people that have already passed their certifications. So it really doesn't matter where you are in this entire process. There's somebody on that Discord that can help you with your studies, and that's usually where I hang out when I'm not doing these live streams. You can join us at professormesser.com/Discord, and you will see it's completely open. You can join us and start chatting right away to talk to folks about some questions you might have about the exam. Also want to let you know that eventually you will need to take your exam. And although I wish these exams were free, there is a cost involved. The hard part about taking these exams is finding the lowest cost for a voucher. Well, I've solved that problem for you because you can either go to the CompTIA website and pay full price, or you can come to my website and either use the link to get an academic voucher if you're in school. But if you're not in school, I have some of the lowest prices you'll find anywhere for vouchers if you are in the US or Canada. Go to professormesser.com/vouchers to purchase that voucher for much less than buying it at full price on the CompTIA website, and it works exactly the same way. Also let you know that if you buy it from my site, I'll even give you extra information. You will get my Exam Hacks ebook absolutely free. This is a book that I've created of a number of tips and tricks that can help you during your studies or even help you get a few extra points while you're in the middle of the exam. So these in-exam strategies are also pretty important. So if you need a voucher and you're looking for some tips, they all come together, all bundled together at professormesser.com/vouchers. Let's talk about the question that we went through earlier. The question asked, a security administrator would like to block Microsoft Windows file and print services on a firewall. Which of the following ports should they block? Should they block UDP 514, TCP 445, TCP 389, TCP 1720, or UDP 161? Let's see how you answered this one. Let's go to our results and see that 69% of you, almost 70% say TCP 445, 15% say TCP 389, 8% say UDP 514. We have 5% that said UDP 161, and 3% say TCP 1720. So we've got a few to choose from here. This is a real challenge if you're ever in the need to configure a firewall. Port numbers is an important thing to know, and that's why there is a big list of port numbers on your exam. This question asks specifically about Microsoft Windows file and print services. So now we have to think in our mind what protocol is used by Microsoft to be able to transfer files or send prints to a print server. And when we use that protocol, what port number does it use? Well, if you think back, the port number that would be used is the server message block. Just like a big block of cheese, that is the block that is transferring a block of data across your network from one device to another. And if you're in this world of Microsoft protocols, you may also hear this referred to as not just SMB, but CIFS, which stands for the Common Internet File System, which is why this particular name SMB was created specifically for Microsoft. The protocol SMB can be sent directly between devices using IP over port 445 using the TCP protocol. So this is very common if you do a packet capture of your Windows today. That's exactly where you would see that. So I think if you're someone who is trying to manage your Microsoft Windows communication, you would like to stop a system from transferring files, or maybe you need to allow that through a firewall, then you're going to allow or disallow TCP port 445. And indeed, 71% of you chose TCP 445. Well done with that one. I think if you're someone who is getting into the world of protocols and firewalls, Network Plus obviously requires you to have a knowledge of that, and this is an important one to know. I will also give you a tip that all of these other ports that are on this list, 514, 389, 1720, and 161, are ports from your exam objectives. So if you don't recognize those, make sure you go back to have a look at what those particular ports and protocols are associated with, because they could certainly show up on your exam as well. The answer here again, TCP 445, 71% got that one absolutely correct. Well done. Well, that was our rewind question. That was a question we did last month, and I now want to give you new questions. And every new question we'll have from this point forward will be brand new questions. This is a question that was posed of me earlier this month. And I thought, well, that's a good question. Let's put it in as a performance-based question as our very first new question of the study group. As I mentioned earlier, the exam consists of both multiple choice questions and performance-based questions. Multiple choice questions, of course, are the ones we just looked at, which is a question and multiple choices to select from. That's something that we're very familiar with. If you've done any type of testing on any level, multiple choice questions are very, very common. But CompTIA also provides a handful of questions at the beginning of the exam that are not multiple choice. They are anything but multiple choice. They might be fill in the blank. They might be a matching question. It could be a question that's a drag and drop question. Maybe you have to put things in a particular order, from highest to lowest or fastest to slowest. All of those things certainly apply. The question I have for you today is a performance-based question, and I guess you could think of it as a fill-in-the-blank question, which obviously is a little bit more difficult than others. Let's have a look at this question and see what you would answer. Again, I'll remind you, no answers in the chat room. Please, no hints in the chat room. Your performance-based question today, it might be a gimme, because it's asking, assign a wire color to each pin. This is T568B, and I want you to tell me what pins 1 through pins 8 are colored as. And if you just want to put them in that order in your fill in the blank of what color is the first one. And you can abbreviate this as well. Just make sure you abbreviate BL is blue, and BR is brown. But just remember the format that you put in at the link you have at the bottom of the screen. ProfessorMesser.com/QA is where you need to lock in this answer. That question, by the way, T568B, is not only important, but you also need to know T568A. But I'm obviously asking you about B. I think the vast majority of what you will find will be B in the different coloring schemes that are used. That's probably the most prevalent. It's very unusual, in fact, to run into A, but I do find it every now and then. As long as you have the same thing on both sides, you're fine. Make sure that the coloring scheme you use on one side is exactly the same as the coloring scheme you use on the other side, and you'll have no problems at all. If you do have if you put A on one side and B on the other side, the results will be, they will differ depending on your infrastructure. I'll just put it that way. You will run into problems. You will probably run into significant problems in some cases, and sometimes you won't run into any problems at all. It really just depends on the chipsets that are being used by the Ethernet adapters. I've done extensive testing with this. I could tell you stories of what we're able to see when we do that. You could do that too. You could put coloring scheme A on one side and coloring scheme B on the other side, plug it in, and you tell me what happened. Then plug in other types of equipment. You'll find that cable will react differently depending on the equipment you're plugging into, which is even more confusing and difficult to troubleshoot. So don't do that. I guess the moral of the story is, if you're wiring, you're punching down your own cables, which does happen, you make sure that the coloring scheme you use on both sides is identical and you don't run into any problems at all. Always important. Keep that in mind if you're someone who's working through this. A number of you have put in your answers already. You worked through the different colors that we have here. And this is one that a lot of people have told me, and the reason this came up is that people were telling me that knowing these color schemes is not important. Because, and their reasoning was, you're never going to have to punch down your own cables. Somebody else will do that for you, or you buy the cables already punched down, which may be true. But I think the important part of this, probably, in fact, in my experience, the most that I've used these knowledge of colors for isn't to punch down the connectors myself. It's to confirm that someone handed me a cable and I need to confirm that this cable is wired correctly. And I put the two ends of the cable up and I look at the colors through the clear connector that's on the end. And I can tell you immediately what color scheme was used and are they colored and labeled right on both sides. That's the one. And then if it's not right, I can hand it back to the person who punched it down, or I can cut the ends off and repunch it myself because I know what the colors are. So sometimes it does come in handy to know these colors. Let's step through each one of these colors and see if it matches what you plugged in as your answers to this question. So let's start this wiring, this wire map, if you will, of what colors are associated with which pins in the T568B coloring scheme. So let's start with the very first one, pin 1. And pin 1 in the 568B is going to be a white-green or green-white, depending on how you look at it. And of course, whenever you look at pins 1 and pins 2, whether it's A or B, the other color that's a solid will be in pin 2. So we know that T568B starts with a green and a white green and a solid green. So already we're off to the races here with already two colors in the list. Now we start splitting things up just a little bit. And we know that 568B has a white and orange as pin 3, but then we mix it up in pin 4, have the blues, the solid blue, and the white and blue as pins 4 and 5. The other side of this, of course, is going to be this one, the orange. So we finish up pin 3 with pin 6 as a solid orange. I think I've got A on here, don't I? Why is this showing up as A? We got green listed. So that is, why is A showing up on my B slide? Watch what happens. Watch what happens when we do this. We'll go back to your answers, and I'm going to, why did this slide in? That's okay. We will slide it out in the right way. So let's format. Watch what we do here. We've got the greens coming in. Look at the ones that I have here. That's kind of sad, isn't it? Why did my oranges not show up on the front end? That's okay. We will figure out where those go. No, that is the B. Did I get the oranges there? This is the one that is my biggest problems on the live streams, is when I start copying and pasting. So this is one where I am going to make an adjustment to my screen. That's okay. In fact, B is probably going to be the one that you work with the most. Did I have the orange color up? That is the orange color up for the B. I think I need to check my own. In fact, this is a good place for those of you that have not gone through my exam materials before. I'm going to give you a fantastic resource, and it's my course notes. This is where you can go to look at what the differences are in the different types. And of course, knowing A and B is going to be right here. So we know with B, for example, if you have my course notes, you would know what the colors were. So that's whenever we start working through these particular problems, that is the one. Well, on my screen, I'm showing the right one there. Why did it list out a different color for me? It sure did. Put the wrong ones on the screen. And it really is just me not having the right thing on my screen. So that's okay. We're going to do this and adjust the colors in real time, because why wouldn't we? This goes away, and now we'll step through the 568B. So if you're someone who is working through your exams and you're thinking, do I really know these colors or not? You can see already how important it is to have them as the right colors. There we go. So I want to bring this up so you can see it directly from my course notes, and we can really make a nice comparison with both of these, because I think that's where we want to focus our efforts. Here is my exam objectives, and now we can really compare A and B. So these are the two. White and orange are indeed pins 1 and 2. And whenever I'm looking through it, I'm always wondering, am I even telling you what the right one happens to be with these? I am. So we now have the right one. Don't worry. See, the chat rooms was really worried. They're like, really? What has happened there? How did we manage to do that on breaking through the details of that? That's exactly where we managed to do it. So I was showing you the A side. And here's the important thing. If you're you only really have to memorize one of these. I know a lot of people like to memorize both at the same time, but you only have to know one of them. The reason is that the green pairs and the orange pairs are simply flipped on both sides. Notice that 568A has white and green as pins 1 and 2. On the 568B, we're dealing with orange as pins 1 and 2. So white and orange in pins 1 and 2. Notice that pins 3 and 6 are the other pair of the orange and green, depending on what you have. So pin 3, white and orange for A, white and green if you're using B. So there's where the differences are. But notice where the things that don't change are pins 4 and 5 and 7 and 8. They are blue, white and brown, respectively. So the important part for memorization, if you're just starting out with this, is once you memorize pins 4, 5, 7, and 8, half of the pins you need to know here, those don't change. So you've already memorized half of them, and it's locked in. You can't go wrong with those. If you know that pin 4 is blue, pin 5 is white and blue, pin 7 is white and brown, and pin 8 is brown, you're fine. So you've got exactly what it should be. Really, all you're doing is swapping orange and green. And if you can remember, the difference is pins 1 and 2 are green in 568A, and pins 1 and 2 are orange in 568B. Everything else should fall apart there, should fall into place for this. Unless it's my presentation, then it will fall apart, just like my presentation did. So even the best laid plans of having some nice animations on my slideware don't really work very well if you're not doing this properly. So if we summarize this, we really have a look at the details, put them side by side, that's what it should be. So there's your 568A and 568B. So I think that's one that if you're probably stepping through the details of this, that's what it would be. Some folks in the chat room are mentioning if you put these on both sides, 568A and 568B on both sides, that's a crossover. It is not a crossover. So make sure you know that that's not the case and understand why it's not the case. If you're trying to plug into a gigabit network and you're using A on one side and B coloring on the other, you may notice that you no longer have a gigabit connection. It's not working the way you would expect. That's what I mean by you will run into problems if you put the A colors on one side and the B colors on the other. You will run into big time problems. Don't do that. Make sure you are putting the right type of cable in the right place and you're using the right scheme for the breakdown of crossovers, because that is so important. And I realize you will find other places on the internet that will tell you differently. They're wrong. So that's what you can tell them, is why do you insist on telling me information that does not comply with the IEEE 802.3 standard, which is really what we're trying to do here, is make sure you know the standards for all of these different connections. And I think that's the important part, is knowing A and B. Make sure you know both of those for the exam, by the way. I mentioned just B in this question. You will need to know it. The answer, of course, is pin 1 is orange and white. Pin 2 is orange. Pin 3 is green and white. Pin 4 is blue. Pin 5 is blue and white. Pin 6 is solid green. Pin 7 is white and brown. And pin 8 is brown. As long as you know those, I think you're in good shape. Those are, and in fact, once you do, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 of these, you crimp them down, you put them into a connector, you crimp them. Once you get through about 4 or 5 of them, you're good. You got it. Just do one of them. Do the B and crimp 5 different connectors in. And once you've crimped the 5th or 6th connector, you've now got it. It's now in your brain. It becomes just part of your muscle memory. And that's one of the best things you can do. So hopefully I didn't mess anybody up too badly. Hopefully you were working on the 568B colors, unlike me, who put completely different set of numbers in your presentation. That's where you should go, is those colors on the 568B. And I will tell you, also know the 568A as well. You could be asked that on your exam. You need to know what the differences are between the A side and the B side. That is your performance-based question of the month. Now that we got through it, I think now that was an extra performance-based question. I had to go through some performance for that particular question, but I think we got the right answer in the end. That is the important part. Let's now shift gears back to a multiple choice-based question. Here is our multiple choice-based question now that asks, recent changes to a DNS configuration have resulted in an email outage. Which of the following DNS records should be checked first? Would we check, let's see if I can give you the right view here. There we go. Should we check Quad A or AAAA record? Should we check the SRV record, the CNAME record, the MX record, or the NS record? Now, if you know the answer, please go to the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. As always, no answers in the chat room, no hints in the chat room, please. We want to lock in our answer by visiting that page, professormesser.com/QA. Lock in what you think the right answer might be of those 5 records. Well, we have an outage. Of course, it's DNS. So now we need to understand which of these records should we check. It could be one or many of these. In fact, if I look at this list, it's possible that all 5 of these could be a problem. But I will also tell you that the question is very specific about what it's asking for, and you need to find the answer that best fits the question. And this is one of those, I think, that we sort of lose sight of when we're studying for this exam. And a lot of people will talk to me about this, is they could answer any one of these and technically be correct. Well, perhaps they could. I mean, any one of these could cause an outage of some kind if you misconfigure them. But that wasn't the question. The question was about a very specific kind of outage. No other type of outage is mentioned. And so we really need to focus on what the specifics are in the question and what problem we're trying to solve. So that's another example of where we really need to go into the details of this to understand what it is. And by the way, this is why I tell people all the time, when somebody asks you to make a change to the DNS, you should immediately be saying, I don't think that's a good idea until we really understand what we're doing. Making any type of change, any one that seems minor, could have a dramatic impact on the rest of the question, on the rest of the situation that you're in. So don't start making changes to DNS unless you know exactly what that change could do. You also need to know exactly what it would take to get back to the issue that we had earlier. So make sure that you know before you make any changes. I'll just tell you that way. You could create some significant problems. Let's see how you did with this question. The question asked, recent changes to a DNS configuration have resulted in an email outage. Which of the following DNS records should be checked first? Would I check Quad A, SRV, CNAME, MX, or NS? Let's see how you answered this question. And you can see that 70%, pretty strong number, say it's MX. We have 11% that said CNAME is what we would use. We have 6% that said Quad A, 5% said SRV, 7% said NS. It's a three-way tie for third place. That is a pretty good one to run through. I think if you're someone who is working on DNS and trying to figure out the details of this, you, especially as it relates to mail, then you know the very first record associated with mail is the mail exchanger record, or the MX record. That's what we would focus on. This tells or specifies in the message itself, or in the configuration of DNS itself, that we want to be able to point directly to where our email server happens to be. That's one of the things that emails coming from anywhere will need to find your email server, and it's the MX record that points over to that particular record. So make sure you're familiar with it. This is a list of the MX records, the one that's at the very top here, the Internet MX record, and it's mail.mydomain.name in this particular example. So now anybody who's trying to find my mail server, that's my mail server. That's where you should go to send your mail in to my particular server. If you are using a DNS provider that gives you a graphical front end, I have the option on my DNS server where I can specify what I would like it to be. So here's a DNS record from my server that has details about mail services and which ones are there. There's an example that I added on the screen just so you could see what the differences might be, whether it's a text-based configuration or more of a browser-based configuration. Either way, it's the same information, just being input into the system in different ways. MX is indeed the right answer. That's what we were looking for. About 70% of you chose that as the answer, and I think that's correct as well. I'm going to go with that one as my answer. A canonical name is a way that you could tell DNS to use different names for a particular server or service. And that's one that allows you to have a web server with www, but we could also call that web server 01. And we can add a CNAME record so that people can specify either one of those to be able to connect to the same device. We also have records for name services. SRV is a service record, and then Quad A specifies IPv6 addresses for a particular device. In this case, we were most concerned because someone said everything's working here, but DNS is out, or email is out. So what should we look at in DNS that might be an issue with our mail services? The only one in this list that has a direct connection to mail, and certainly a primary connection to mail, is indeed the mail exchanger record. It's in the name of it itself, and 70% got that one absolutely correct. Well done. Let's do another multiple choice question for those of you. A lot of folks are even joining us right now. So let's use this time to go through this question that asks, a network technician has connected a cable to a switch and inadvertently created a loop. Which of the following configurations would have prevented this issue? Would it be full duplex, RSTP, DHCP snooping, SNMP traps, or captive portal? All real things, all things you need to know for your exam. They come directly from the exam objectives, but only one of them is the correct answer. If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA right there on your screen. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. The question again asks, a network technician has connected a cable to a switch and inadvertently created a loop. Which of the following configurations would have prevented this issue? Full duplex, RSTP, DHCP snooping, SNMP traps, or captive portal? If you think you know the answer, lock it in. There's your link, professormesser.com/QA, to lock in your answer. We'll have to see if you know this one. This one is, I think if you're someone who's working through the details of really understanding the exam objectives, then you really do need to know what all 5 of these are. So again, this is really a good example of maybe this is a situation where you would really like to know that it's C, D, A, B, E, whatever it happens to be. I really want to know, what does that mean? So if you got the question right, or you think you got the question right, make sure you know what the other 4 options are and what they're used for. You get a question on your exam about those as well. So another example of how you can learn a little bit more by studying not just the right answers, but sometimes studying the wrong answers. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asked, a network technician has connected a cable to a switch and inadvertently created a loop. Which of the following configurations would have prevented this issue? Would it be full duplex, RSTP, DHCP snooping, SNMP traps, or captive portal? Let's see what you chose. 65%, 66% say it's RSTP is the answer we were looking for. Not as strong as the last one, but still pretty good. We got 12% that say full duplex would have solved this issue. And then we have pretty much single digits, 3-way tie for third place between SNMP traps, DHCP snooping, and captive portal. RSTP was a pretty strong winner for this one, but is that really the right answer? We first have to know what RSTP is. And that is obviously the Rapid Spanning Tree Protocol. Spanning Tree Protocol has been around, well, in the world of networking, it seems like it's been here forever. It's been used on our networks for a very, very long time. And one of the challenges with Spanning Tree is it takes a number of seconds when you connect to the network to go through the entire process of making sure that you're not going to create a loop, and then finally adding you to the network and allowing you to communicate. So an updated version to Spanning Tree Protocol was created to speed up this process. And in we all sat around in a big meeting and said, how could we call this a faster version of STP? Well, we came up with Rapid. So it wasn't like we spent a lot of time on this. Rapid STP moves from something around from 30 to 50 seconds to converge once someone connects to the network, down to about 6 seconds, which is much more reasonable for, I think, most people. It is backwards compatible, though, so if you are connecting to a network that is the older style of STP, it will work in conjunction with that, and everything works just fine. It's one where if you're running a switched network, you should have some flavor of Spanning Tree Protocol configured. If you don't, you're setting yourself up for a loop that is going to bring down your entire network. So probably one of the first things you should check on your switches is that you are indeed running Spanning Tree Protocol. If you're not running Spanning Tree, maybe on your network at home, try connecting 2 switch ports to each other. Report back. Tell me how that went. Be a significant outage. Very quickly, your network will suddenly stop working. You have to unplug that loop to have that work again. You don't want to run into that situation. That's why you want to use Spanning Tree Protocol, or the faster version of Rapid Spanning Tree Protocol. 67% of you chose B. That's absolutely correct. 12% of you said full duplex. Full duplex is great for improving communication across a single link because you're able to both send and receive information simultaneously. But if your network is looped, that's not going to help you. All it will do is improve your efficiency of not being able to communicate. Because you're running full duplex, doesn't stop the loop from occurring, however. We have 9% that said SNMP traps, which could inform us that part of the network is down because you created a loop, but it's not going to stop the loop from occurring in the first place. So SNMP traps isn't going to help us by preventing the issue. It would only report that something has gone wrong and part of the network is no longer working optimally. We have 6% that said DHCP snooping, which can stop somebody from putting their own DHCP server on the network, like a rogue DHCP server. We also have captive portal. That obviously pops a screen up when we connect to a network that asks us to approve, authenticate, or in some way continue on with the connection. It requires some type of user intervention to be able to gain access to that network. That would not have stopped a loop either. The only thing in this list that would come anywhere close to preventing this issue is indeed Rapid Spanning Tree Protocol. Answer B, 67% of you got that one absolutely correct. Well done. Well, earlier on, when I had misconfigured myself into the slides for my T568B color scheme, I showed you a little bit of information from my set of Network Plus course notes. If you've looked at any part of the Network Plus exam, it's a big exam. In fact, my video series is 93 videos over 14 hours of content dealing with network appliances, security, troubleshooting, rapid spanning tree protocol, subnetting, other types of protocols, plenty to know. And so one of the challenges people have is that there's all this information in the videos. How do I get that down to one place? How can I have one single view of what I might be able to see on this particular network? Well, what you need is something like my course notes. My course notes are both a digital and indeed a physical form. I think I have my physical course notes here. There they are. You can get a physical book of my course notes, which is identical to the digital version, which you see on the screen here. This is the digital PDF version that has all of the text, all of the important graphics, all of the tables, everything that's in my videos that's important is right there. So I tell people all the time, if you're looking for something that's really going to help you lock this information away and have it in a form that's easy to access and something you can easily study from wherever you happen to be on whatever device you happen to be using at that time, then you could use my course notes. They're available on my website. My N10-008 course notes are there under professormesser.com/NPCN, or you can find my course notes on the pull-down menus at the top of the page. Another great way to get everything in one place and help your studies. It's also a great way to support what we do here on the website. Find out more about that at professormesser.com/NPCN. Let's do another multiple choice based question. This next question asks, a router interface is showing a large number of CRC errors. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for these errors? Would it be incorrect speed, faulty cable, invalid authentication, outdated firmware, or incorrect VLAN assignment? A router interface showing a large number of CRC errors. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for these errors? Is it an incorrect speed, a faulty cable, invalid authentication, outdated firmware, or an incorrect VLAN assignment? Do you think you know the answer? Lock in your answer here, professormesser.com/QA, and please, no answers in the chat room. Please, no hints in the chat room. Let's go to the link on your screen. See if you happen to know what this one is. A lot of people locking their answers in pretty quick on this one. I try to make these difficult enough so that we know some of them, we may not know others of them. So let's see how we did with this one. Have a look at the 5 different options there, which are all troubleshooting things we should know for the exam. So make sure you're familiar with everything that's there. If you don't recognize one of them, again, make a note, go back to your study materials, make sure you know what those terms are before you take your Network Plus exam. Let's see how we did. The question asked, a router interface is showing a large number of CRC errors. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for these errors? Would it be an incorrect speed, a faulty cable, an invalid authentication, an outdated firmware, or incorrect VLAN assignment? What did you choose? Let's see what the different options are. 52%, just over half of you say that would be a faulty cable. We've got 19% that said an incorrect VLAN assignment. We've got a two-way tie for third place between incorrect speed and invalid authentication. And coming in last place with 8% is outdated firmware. Well, again, one of the problems or challenges with these types of questions is that technically there are multiple questions here that could potentially cause this problem. But that wasn't the question. Again, the question asked, which of the following would be the most likely reason for these errors? So let's talk about errors that you would have on an interface. There's our switch. We plugged in connectors into the switch. We're looking at statistics for each individual interface and getting information about how these interfaces are performing. If we have different sized frames that are coming through, a frame needs to be a minimum of 64 bytes. And if frames are suddenly appearing that are less than 64 bytes, there's some type of problem going on. We refer to those smaller frames as runts. Pretty obvious there. On the other side, if we're getting frames that are more than 1,500 bytes and we don't have jumbo frames turned on, well, that's a problem too. Those are giants, and we don't want giants to occur either. In most practical terms on your network, it would be very unusual for you to see either runts or giants. Most of the time, we have those counters stay at a 0. Be very unusual for those to appear. An error that would appear more commonly, but perhaps still relatively rarely, is a CRC error. There's a frame check sequence that's used for the cyclic redundancy check on the frame itself. And if what this really is telling us is we received a frame, everything in the frame came through. It's not a giant, it's not a runt, it's properly sized. But when I ran the checksum at the end of the frame, it didn't match the data in the frame. Therefore, something in that data is corrupted. Something is not the way it was when it left the original device. Something along the way caused the data within that frame to become changed. And that's something obviously we don't want to have happen. And that, of course, is exactly why we have these checks in the frame itself, so we know when those particular problems occur. A CRC error and running into a CRC error is significant. In fact, here is a good example of an interface statistics screen from a Cisco switch. I just asked to do a show interface of a single interface. And there's a lot of information that comes up on the screen. It's almost intimidating the first time you see it. And then as you bring up this is a very common command to show the interface statistics. After a while, it just becomes second nature on what you're looking for and where it happens to be located. And if you happen to look down here, you will see the 5-minute output rate and the different statistics for errors on this particular device: runts, giants, throttles, input errors, CRC. And in this link, CRC is down to 0. So this is one where you your eye will go to certain places on the screen so you can find exactly the information that you're looking for. This is a really good example of how we've sent thousands of packets in. We've received lots of broadcasts, but we don't have any CRC errors on this particular connection, which means none of our data was corrupted. So what would cause data corruption? What would cause CRC errors to start incrementing on this particular device? Well, let's go through the list. Let's start at the bottom. 8% said outdated firmware. Generally speaking, an outdated firmware is not going to cause physical errors on your connection. If you wanted to stretch it a bit, you could say if the firmware was badly written, it could improperly interpret a CRC error and have the counter. Yeah, I suppose it could. But that wasn't the question. The question asked which of these would be the most likely reason. I've never seen that happen with firmware. It's possible it could happen, but that would be incredibly rare. One that I would not put in a category of most likely, anywhere near most likely. This would be most unlikely reason, would be outdated firmware. We have 12% or 10% that said the incorrect speed. If you set up a connection for a gigabit link and you hardwire it and say this is a gig connection, and you plug it into a 100 megabit switch, which is not capable of gig connection, you'll have no connection at all. It simply will not work. It won't work slower. It won't work at all. So a CRC error won't appear because the link itself is not operational. So incorrect speed would not be our correct answer. Invalid authentication, which I guess we're assuming here there's 802.1x or some other type of authentication process to gain access to the network. If we put in a wrong username and password, there will certainly be a message in the authentication log that says someone tried to log in with the wrong credentials, but all of the information going over the network is still perfect. It's still working the way you would expect. There is no corruption of data simply by putting in an incorrect username and password, so that's not going to cause CRC errors either. And then lastly, an incorrect VLAN assignment would put you into an IP subnet. In this case, really, we're talking VLANs. It's really more of a broadcast domain. Either way, being in the incorrect broadcast domain or being on the incorrect IP subnet would certainly create problems communicating to other devices, but it's not going to create a corruption of the data over the network and cause CRC errors, so it would not be an incorrect VLAN assignment either. The best answer here, the one that is the most likely reason for these errors, is indeed a faulty cable. We'll do it every time. There have been so many times when I've seen a switch showing me just tons of CRC errors, and I go out to where that particular interface is on the floor, and somebody's taken a table and they pushed it up against the wall and it's crunched the end of the network connection, and you've got a RJ45 going into the wall and a 90-degree angle of the cable coming out on the other side, and they've created some type of short in the cable. Cut off the end of the cable, put a new connector on, plug it in, move the table away from it, and the CRC errors go away. It's a bad cable. Now, obviously, CRC errors could be caused by bad hardware. Maybe the interface on the switch is going bad. That could cause the problem as well. That wasn't one of our options. So many different things can cause problems with this. But I think whenever you're working through these issues, especially questions that ask what the most likely reason is for this, that I think we need to really understand the details of what we're dealing with and look at all possible issues that could be occurring. The one in this list that is the most likely is indeed the faulty cable. It should have jumped right out at you, and 53% of you got that one absolutely correct. Let's do another question. Here's the next one on our list. It asks, a network technician has identified network frames with multiple 802.1q tags. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for these tags? Is it because we're using jumbo frames, we're doing MAC spoofing, we're doing VLAN hopping, we're doing piggybacking, or there is an evil twin? 5 good options there. The question again asks, a network technician has identified network frames with multiple 802.1q tags. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for these tags? Would it be jumbo frames, MAC spoofing, VLAN hopping, piggybacking, or evil twin? If you think you know the answer, there's the link. Go to professormesser.com/QA. Lock in your answer right there. While we're doing this, I want to see if I can catch this one that came through earlier. Jimmy in the chat room with the $10 super chat who says, I passed my A+ on Monday thanks to your awesome videos. You helped change my life. Cheers. Well, Jimmy, you're the one that changed your life. I just provided some videos that maybe can help along with that. So hopefully those did help. I think they did a little bit, Jimmy. Thanks so much for the $10 super chat. Congratulations on your A+. And now that you're in here in the Network Plus study group, maybe Network Plus is next on your list. I always tell people that's always a good follow-up if you're trying to get a certification that applies to anything you would ever do in IT. A networking certification certainly qualifies there. You can't go wrong. Let's see. This one, notice the people locking in their answers on this one a little bit slower than the last one. I'm always checking the results number at the top as people are, and this is a real-time status update showing me how many people have locked in their answers. And if I think I'm giving you an easy one, the number goes up really quickly. If this is a little bit harder, they go a little bit slower. But doesn't necessarily mean that the final answers are anything different than what we've seen before, which is always interesting. Like, are we all finding the right answer at the end of this, even though we're spending a little more time, or is it still all over the place when we start looking at the answers? So let's see how we did on this one. The question again asked, a network technician has identified network frames with multiple 802.1q tags. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for these tags? Would it be jumbo frames, MAC spoofing, VLAN hopping, piggybacking, or evil twin? And what did we choose? Here we go. I think we did pretty well. 60% of you say VLAN hopping. As long as that's the right answer, I guess we did pretty well. We'll find out in a moment. 15% said MAC spoofing. 10% said jumbo frames. 10% said evil twin. And 5% said piggybacking. So this is a case where I will say that in all likelihood, in most common configurations, we should never see this. If we're seeing network frames that have multiple .1q tags inside of it, here in the world, we don't say 802.1q, we say .1q. Those .1q tags are there to be able to direct data to a particular VLAN between switches. That's why we would use those. And if we've got multiple tags, then we're trying to circumvent those VLAN rules that we have within our switch. What would happen is we would go through one switch, which removes one of the VLAN tags, continues the information on its way to another switch, which removes the second VLAN tags. And now we've been able to move from a VLAN that we were assigned to, we were able to hop to a VLAN that we were not assigned to. So this is a way to send data into a VLAN that technically we should not be able to touch. That VLAN is segmented, and there's no way we should gain access to that. There are configuration mechanisms within your switch that should allow you to reject frames that are sent in with this data. And it's one that is an important security concern so that we know people aren't sending data into VLANs that normally they should not have access to. Double tagging is what we would use for something like that. Visually, it works by sending this data with these two tags, a green tag and a red tag. It pulls off one of the tags on the first switch, leaving the other, then moves to the second switch. And even though we were on VLAN 10, we are now sending data over to VLAN 20. That's the way that double tagging works. And in fact, that is the right answer. VLAN hopping is taking advantage of that double tagging. That is 60% of you chose C as your option for VLAN hopping to be able to do that. So obviously, that is an attack. That's something that somebody's trying to circumvent the segmentation that you have in your switches. So that's a really good example of something bad going on. We have other types of problems here that could be happening. MAC spoofing is obviously a concern, especially a security concern, but MAC spoofing doesn't have multiple .1Q tags inside of it. It's simply changing the MAC address of the sending or destination device on the data that we're sending out. That's down at layer 2. .1Q tags are slightly above that. Really, not really. They're really at layer 2 to 3, maybe let's say 2.5, because they're sort of circumventing that area between a broadcast domain and an IP subnet. I guess we could even spread it across. This is the problem when you start talking any detail with an OSI model, is that it's just a model. There's no way to definitively stick anything into the OSI model without having a big argument. And so MAC spoofing would not be something that would be associated with multiple .1Q tags because it's down at farther end, really at the closer to the beginning of the frame where the MAC addresses happen to be. We've got 10% say jumbo frames. We talked earlier about frames being larger than 15, 18 bytes. That's jumbo frames, and that's one where our frames are too big for the network, but that would not indicate anything with multiple .1Q tags. An evil twin is referring most commonly to an access point. Doesn't have to be, but that's generally how we refer to evil twins, as access points. That's one way to get your own access point on a network, but has nothing to do with using multiple .1Q tags. And lastly, piggybacking is something that happens in the physical world where you are going behind somebody through a locked door where they've authenticated through the door and you're simply following them through. That's what piggybacking happens to be. Only 5% of you chose that one. The only option here that would be the most likely reason for these tags is VLAN hopping. 61% of you got that one absolutely correct. If you chose C, you were right. If you're watching this video for continuing education unit credit, I would love to send you an email that certifies that you watched 1 hour of a webinar category CEU. The way that you would earn that email is to follow these steps. Make sure you follow the steps. You go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website at professormesser.com. Click the link for Contact Us. In that Contact Us link, put your name, your email address. In the subject line, put June 2023 Network Plus. And then in the body of the message, on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, VLAN hopping. VLAN hopping are the super secret code words of the month. And then if you'd like to put anything else in that message you would like, hit enter a couple times and you can put anything in there that you would like. VLAN hopping is our super secret code word. Again, go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. Go to Contact Us. Click on that and put in your name, your email address. Put in June 2023 Network Plus as the subject line. And then in the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, VLAN hopping. I'd like to do one more. I know we're at the top of the hour. Let's do one more question, I think. And before we get there, Keith S. in the chat room says, piggybacking and tailgating are the same, functionally the same, but the difference is whether they know that you are tailing them or not, whether they know you are piggybacking with them or not. So, for example, if there's somebody, if you're doing piggybacking, that's obviously somebody's jumped on your shoulders and you're piggybacking, you're traveling with them as they are on your shoulders. Clearly, you know they are there. So this would be a time where you badge in, you say, come on in. Thanks for joining us. Now you don't need to sign in. We don't need to go through that security nonsense. I already have a card that opens the door, lets us through. You can piggyback in with me. Whereas somebody who's doing tailgating, They aren't telling you that they're tailgating. It's one of those times you ever see the movie. Somebody badges through a door opens, they go through, the door's closing, and they show that tight shot of them sticking their foot in at the last second. And then they're able to walk through, and nobody knows that they're walking through because that person has already walked down the aisle. They don't even know you're behind them. They think that you badged in just fine. But no, you snuck in on the other side of it. And that's the difference. There is slight differences. You do need to know the difference on that for Security Plus. I don't know if that's in the Network Plus or not. I think that's a good example of that. Let's do one more question since we are here at the top of the hour. Here is a question. There we go. This question asks, a technician keeps an Ethernet crossover cable in their tool bag. Which of the following would best describe the use of this cable? Would that be connect a laptop directly to a router, power a VoIP phone with PoE, connect a desktop computer directly to a switch, access a switch console, or connect two buildings across a 5-kilometer distance? It's got to be one of these, right? A technician keeps an Ethernet crossover cable in their tool bag. Which of the following would best describe the use of this cable? Is it to connect a laptop directly to a router, power a VoIP phone with PoE, connect a desktop computer directly to a switch, access a switch console, or connect two buildings across a 5-kilometer distance? This is another one of those questions where more than one question could technically be correct. Possibly. It could. But that wasn't the question. The question asked, which of the following would best describe the use of this cable? Which means you need to find the best use of the Ethernet crossover cable that you keep in your tool bag. You have an Ethernet crossover cable in your tool bag, don't you? Of course you do. In my tool bag, well, I'll explain when we're done what I have in my tool bag, and we'll talk about. I wish I had it here. I could show you some of the things that are there, but I think this is good. Make sure you're familiar with those. Lock in your answer. There's the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, to lock in your answer. See if you think you know what the right answer would be. You've got it in your tool bag. You must be carrying it around for something. What would you use it for? That is the idea. You probably have a lot of cables in your tool bag. I always carried many cables in my tool bag. In reality, I carried only a few cables, and I used adapters a lot. We'll talk about that in a moment too, which I think was one of the best things I did for traveling was not to rely on cables, but to rely on adapters. And usually it was adapters that I created myself, which was even better because I could recreate them if I needed to. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asked, a technician keeps an Ethernet crossover cable in their tool bag. Which of the following would best describe the use of this cable? Does it connect a laptop directly to a router? Does it power a VoIP phone with PoE? Does it connect a desktop computer directly to a switch? Does it access a switch console? Or does it connect two buildings across a 5-kilometer distance? How did you answer? Let's show the results. We're all over the place. We've got this crossover cable, and we don't know what we're going to do with it. 36% of us say we're going to access a switch console. 33% say connect a laptop directly to a router. 21% say connect a desktop computer directly to a switch. 90% of you answered one of those three answers. It's effectively a three-way tie. Maybe a little bit more answered access a switch console. Only 5% say power a VoIP phone with PoE, and only 5% said connect two buildings across a 5-kilometer distance. I got to tell you, sometimes these surprise me. I'm just never sure how things are going to turn out. So let's say we have a crossover cable. For example, here's a crossover cable. It is a T568B crossover cable. I will very astutely make the point that you'll notice this crossover cable is 568B on one side and 568A. Oh, wait, that's not 568A on the other side. That's not what all the books say, or not all of them, some of the books say, but that is the correct crossover cable configuration that comes directly from the 802.3 standard. So this is what a gigabit crossover cable looks like. But where would you use this? What's it good for? This is very commonly used to connect two devices directly to each other without using a switch. So if you have, for instance, two laptops next to each other, you could use an Ethernet crossover cable to connect both of those devices directly to each other. If you have two routers, you can use a crossover cable to connect those two routers to each other. If you have any two devices, a desktop computer and a laptop computer, you can plug them directly into each other with an Ethernet crossover cable. So this becomes handy if you don't have a switch available. Maybe you don't want to use the switch that's there. Instead, you just want to connect the two devices to each other and get rid of everything else. Now, if you don't have a serial connection, you could potentially use this to connect to a console type connection. I guess you could use SSH, so you could plug directly into a device, but that's not the primary use of an Ethernet crossover cable. Generally, if you're connecting to a console on a device, as we say here, you use a serial cable or a serial connector. So this would be a USB or a DB9 type serial connection. This is not a very common alternative. Normally, you would use the appropriate connection to the console that's on there. And this is why, however, you would carry this crossover cable or an adapter that would turn a regular cable into a crossover, because very often you would need to connect Ethernet devices without using a switch. That is the most common reason for using an Ethernet crossover cable. So which of these would connect two Ethernet devices without using a switch? 4% said power a VoIP phone with PoE. That's not what a crossover cable is good for. In fact, we would need to have power on the cable coming from a switch to be able to power that VoIP phone with power over Ethernet or PoE. So that's not what we would use a crossover cable for. 5% said use a crossover cable to connect two buildings across a 5-kilometer distance. Our Ethernet crossover cable, which is a copper cable, doesn't provide us with a way to connect buildings across 5 kilometers. If the two buildings were 100 meters from each other, we could potentially use it that way, but not 5 kilometers. That's really something where we would need a fiber connection. It would not be a crossover. It would probably be a direct connection between those two buildings. We have 22% that said connect a desktop computer directly to a switch. Well, crossover cables are used if you are not using a switch. They connect devices not directly to a switch. So in this case, that's not one we would use either. Connecting a desktop computer directly to a switch uses a straight through cable. It doesn't need crossover. So that's not one we would use. Accessing a switch console, we've already said that's not the most common use of an Ethernet crossover cable. In fact, it's very uncommon to use that as a console cable. The most common use of a crossover cable is to connect two devices directly to each other. And in fact, if you're connecting a laptop directly to a router, you would not use straight through there. You would use crossover. That is the answer we were looking for. Answer A, 33% of you chose connect a laptop directly to a router. That is a perfect use of an Ethernet crossover cable, and that is the answer we were looking for in this particular case. We want to be able to connect those two devices, and we would need a crossover cable to be able to do that. Very common use of this, for example, is when I would set up firewalls to each other, especially in the situations where you are setting up redundant firewalls. You got high availability where you have two firewalls that you're installing. Maybe one firewall is the primary and it fails over to a secondary if the first one fails. Sometimes you're setting up firewalls to be active-active where both firewalls are splitting the load and they are both operating at the same time, which is a bit more complicated to engineer, but still a very common configuration to be able to use. And so when you're doing that and you need to connect those firewalls directly to each other without using some other third-party piece of equipment so that they can talk to each other and send data back and forth so that each firewall knows what the other one is doing. And to do that, you would plug them in with a crossover cable. That is the connection you would use without anything else in the middle. And in this case, plugging a laptop directly to a router is another one of those examples where crossover cables fit perfectly. Straight throughs are used to connect to a switch. Straight through connections are used almost exclusively to connect to a switch. But if you're connecting other devices to each other, and in this case, a laptop and a router are ones that you would use to connect crossover connections there. And in my videos, I have examples of when you would use crossover, when you wouldn't use crossover cables. That is very common. A common scenario if you're someone working with crossover cables to be able to use those. A really good example, by the way, of when to use a crossover cable and when not to use a crossover cable. That's just good info. That is a very common thing to know, something you should have ingrained into your brain so that you can know immediately what cable should I be using with this and to use the right one to be able to make that happen. Crossover cables between a laptop and a router is exactly where we would use a crossover cable. For those of you wondering, where does all this information come from? Where do all these topics come from? They are all spelled out for you in the exam objectives. The exam objectives are a very good way to be able to know exactly what could be asked of you on the exam. They make a great checklist, and it's free. Make sure you download this. It should be the first thing that you download. It should be professormesser.com/objectives, or simply go to your favorite search engine, type in CompTIA exam objectives. It will take you directly to that page. Download the latest set of objectives. Make sure you're familiar with those. It's exactly where you need to go to know if you've studied everything for your exam. They're a great final checklist and being able to make that happen. This is at professormesser.com/objectives. So make sure you have those, you use them. They're very, very valuable. Make sure you're familiar with all of these and being able to work through them. They are an incredibly important resource. They tell you everything you need to know. Don't walk into your exam until you've downloaded this and gone through every single bullet. It's a perfect checklist before going into your exam, making that happen. Also want to let you know that I do one of these study groups every month. This was our study group for Network Plus this month. Of course, next week at this time, we have our Security Plus study group. You're welcome to join us next week at the same time. But if you'd like to join us for the next Network Plus study group, it is on July the 18th. July is kind of a weird month because of the holiday here in the U.S. On July the 4th. So I've scrunched together the A Plus study groups on the 11th and 13th of July. Network Plus is on the 18th of July, and Security Plus is on the 20th of July. So you can figure out exactly what those different options are. Now, if it's after July when you're watching this and you're wondering, well, I don't know when the next event is going to be, you can always go to professormesser.com/calendar and find out when the next live event is going to be, or simply click on the calendar link at the top of our website. Well, if you've made it this far, you've already gone through the first hour of questions, but we're not done yet. Stick around for the after show where I'll take questions directly from you in the chat room, and we can answer some of these questions some folks have about crossover cables, about the industry, about what certification to get, or you can really ask anything you'd like. I don't know if I'll answer everything that you ask, but I'll try to. We'll make sure that happens. Stick around for the after show there. Don't forget about our success bundle. Go to professormesser.com/netsuccess. You can also get our discounted vouchers. Don't forget about those. And I also have links to the academic store if you're a student to get vouchers, in some cases at a 50% discount. That's at professormesser.com/vouchers. Use that first link at the top of the page if you're a student, where it tells you about the details of that. Don't forget about us. When we're done here, we'll be on Discord. You can join our Discord at professormesser.com/discord. Don't forget about our YouTube, our Twitter, our Instagram, and other links as well. Go to professormesser.com/ the name of the website you would like to find us on. You'll probably find it just fine. There's plenty to look at there. Well, I know that is a lot in a very short period of time. Hopefully that's given you a perspective of things you should know for Network Plus. Stick around for our after show. I've got many more questions coming from you in just a moment, but thanks for joining us. We will see you next time on the Network Plus study group. Thanks, everybody. Okay, let me take a sip. So let me find a picture of me. There I am. Whoa, that's two pictures of me. We only need one of those. There's only so much of me you need to have there. So make sure you are familiar with that. Yeah, some folks are wondering about crossover cables and how they work. I think I had a picture of that crossover cable on the screen. I'm going to flip back to that really quick because a few questions on that came through, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But while we're doing that, I want to first tell you that now this is the part of the show where you ask me questions. So in our YouTube, I'm going to start a Q&A there and click here to ask a question. And then there will be a Q&A link at the top of the chat. So if you have a specific question, that's where I'll just be gathering all the questions in one place, so I don't have to keep scrolling through the list of things as we go through all of this. Did you miss the code word for credits? You sure did. So make sure you go back in the rewind when we're done here on the replay and find out when that is going to be. You have to hunt it down, figure out the details of that. So some folks are saying, wait, I've used a straight through cable to plug into a router before. You've probably used a straight through cable to plug into what we call a SOHO wireless access point router switch. It's those little devices we use at home that I think generally we refer to them as routers. They're not routers. They are routers, switches, firewalls, access points, and more in a single box. What you're plugging into on the back of those devices are the switch ports. On those devices, there's one router port. Actually, it's a switch port too. It's the connection for your WAN. There are no technical switch or technically no router interfaces on that device. The routing part's done internally. When I speak of routers, I speak in the enterprise term of an actual router, of a real router, not something that calls itself a router. The real routers out there have standard Ethernet connections. You can think of them as the same Ethernet interface you have on your laptop, the same Ethernet interface you have on a desktop, the same interface you have on a server. That's the same interfaces on a router. Therefore, those interfaces are similar to each other, and we would need a crossover cable to properly communicate between those two. So that's why the router's not the exception. The router is exactly the same interface type as a laptop. It's exactly the same interface type as a server. They are not different in that scenario. So that's why I tell you have to know the differences between a router interface, a switch interface, a server interface, a laptop interface. Make sure you're familiar with what those types of interfaces are. Are they MDI or are they MDIX? And that's why I give you a list of those. It's in my video course on which of these would be used in which scenario. And it's important to know what those are. And you'll certainly run into that in other exams. And indeed, it's one of the most important things you need to know in sort of actual work, because you have this box full of cables and somebody says, I need a straight through cable or I need a crossover cable. You need to understand when you would use those and what the differences are. And then perhaps more importantly, you need to grab that cable and look at both ends of the cable. I wish I had an Ethernet cable sitting around here. I don't. But grab the cable and look at the connectors and see if they are straight through or if they are crossed over or if there's something else. Sometimes your cable won't work and you put them up to each other and you say, who punched this down? These are completely wrong. These are just random. Well, of course, it's not going to work. So we cut off the end and we put the other end. You find out, oh, this is 568B. Let's put another connector on 568B, and now it's just straight through cable and it works properly. That's it. That's how it works. So let me get the chat room here so I can show you a few things and get other connections there to have this here. There are a number of different options here. There's a lot on my screens to pull from, but I want to step through the different questions that you might have, and you can put them into the chat. At the top of the screen is a link that says, put your questions here. And you've just got to tell you filled up the screen with all of these to be able to have this here. We'll start with the one, probably a frequently asked question. Hey, when are we getting Network Plus practice tests? You'll notice if you go to my website, I don't have practice tests available for you at the moment. It says the A+ ones were very helpful. Well, I do have plans to introduce some Network Plus practice tests. I don't know if it'll be this year or not. It's one of those situations where there's a lot of projects going on. We've already started writing the questions for that book. These are very time-consuming things to write through. We are working on it. It's never as fast as I would like. It's certainly not as fast as you would like. But my challenge is to get those done eventually. So I don't even have a date for you. I'm so sorry. But that's an important question. It's one I'm very aware of, and I want to get you a set of practice exams as well. I do have plans to make them, but this challenge of 24 hours in a day is one that I constantly am hitting my head against. So I will continue to do so, but that's the idea. I want to be sure to have that there. Another question in the chat room from Epsidon, who says, how long on average does it take to study for the Network Plus exam? I would say on average, I would say it probably takes 2 to 3 months for most folks. But it really depends on what you know for your own experiences, your own knowledge, the things you've done in the past. If you know some of these topics already, your studies are going to go a little faster. If you've already been in the industry for a long time, you might study for 2 weeks and take the exam. Or if you don't have a lot of time to study during the day, it might take you 6 months to go through the material. I'm more of a 6-month studier because it just takes so long to study for these certification exams. So even though the average is 2 to 3 months, some people take 6 months, some people take 9 months, some people take a year to get through them. The focus and the part that you should think about is the exam objectives. I'm going to pull up the objectives just so we can look at them really quick. I've already talked about them a couple of times, just so you're aware of them. Here are the objectives. There we go. I want to show you, I'm going to scroll through these just to tell you what I mean when I talk about the objectives. First page tells you about the exam and things you should know, the test details and the percentages of the different domains. But the thing I want you to see are the bullets. So let's scroll down, for example, to section 1.2, explain characteristics of network topologies and network types. Now, I've marked mine up a little bit, so I've colored some things in. I work on different things when we're building this, but you could also annotate yours as well. But the bullets are the important part. So you should know mesh. You should know about star or / hub and spoke networks, bus networks, ring, hybrid, network types and characteristics, including peer-to-peer, client-server, metropolitan area network, wide area network, wireless local area network, personal area network, campus area network, storage area, and so on. A lot of bullets here. So when I tell you need to know everything in the exam objectives, you need to tell me or somebody or yourself, what is a mesh network and where would you use that? What is a star network? Where would you use or see that? What is a bus network? What is a campus area network? What is a demarcation point? What is a vSwitch? What is a leased line provider link? So all of these bullets could potentially be asked of you on the exam. That's why I tell you, go to the exam objectives. They will tell you what you need to know. And it's incredibly important to have the perspective of what is going to be presented to me on this exam, and did I really cover all the topics I needed to know? They stick to the exam objectives almost exclusively, to the point that I tell people, and I really believe this, if you know all of these exam objectives, you're going to pass your exam with no problem. That's how important these objectives are, and that's why I tell you to get the exam objectives. So absolutely be familiar with those. Let's go through other questions that you've sent in. Quite a few have come in, so let me flip through and see more of these. This sort of fits into the same scenario. It's sort of a follow-up to that exam objectives. What are some concepts and processes you think should be prioritized when studying for the Network Plus that we may see more often in the real world? I don't think, for the purposes of the exam, let's just say the real world is over here. Although what's in the exam objectives are very specific and accurate to things you would find in an actual data center, in an actual network operations center, the important part of the exam objectives is to have you earn the Network Plus certification. There is no other point there. There are topics on Network Plus that are certainly lend themselves to be more common in different environments. If you're in a network operations center, some topics on the exam may be really, really common and important for you to know. If you're working as a field technician, some topics on Network Plus may be very different. You might have a different set of topics that are really important. So I can't point to any one set and say these are more important than the other. For the purposes of your exam, every topic is just as important as every other topic. You will get a mix of different questions on your exam. Every exam is different. No one gets the same exam as someone else. That's how big the question pool is. The only thing that's important for you to know from a percentage perspective is how much of these questions will be asked of you on the exam. And in the exam objective, it tells you all the topics from networking fundamentals domain is 24% of your exam. The network implementations is 19%, network operations is 16%, network security is 19%, and network troubleshooting is 22%. Except for operations, that's pretty much the same. They are almost evenly distributed for your exam. So I tell people, don't worry so much on topics, on what you think might be more important than others, because every topic on the exam objectives is important. People will spend a lot of time memorizing port numbers. And if you look at the exam objectives, let's bring this one up again, because I think this is a perfect example. This is in section 1.5. There's a big list of port numbers. Here they are. So, in fact, can I fit them all on the screen? Let's see if I can. So, no, I can't. That's how big they are. There's a lot of port numbers. I can almost fit them all on the screen. So, there's a lot you need to know. There's a lot of stuff here. There they are. And people will spend weeks trying to memorize all of these. Should you know them? Yes, you should. Should you be spending more time on these than other parts of the exam? Absolutely not, because this is one section of a much larger domain. This is one section, 1.5, but in section 1 is 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. We're going to skip over 1.5, 1.6, 1.7, and 1.8. So there's 8 different subsections in this domain. All of sections 1.1 through 1.8 is all put together into 24% of your exam. That means statistically, you could get one question about port numbers. You could get 2 questions about port numbers. You might get no questions about port numbers. And so there have been people that have come to me after the exam and they've said, I spent weeks studying port numbers and I didn't get any questions on my exam about port numbers. This is awful. I thought you said to study this. Well, that's the randomness of the exam means that they could ask you anything of any of these topics. And there are many topics in this list that you simply will not get on your exam because they're only going to give you 90 questions and you've got hundreds of different bullets in that set of exam objectives. So I will tell people, don't worry so much about what you think is the most important topics on the exam. Instead, take every topic as important and learn all of them. You can't rely on any of them to suddenly appear on the exam and somehow be part of what you're doing with the exam. There's no guarantees. You just don't have any way to know what will be asked of you, and you have no way to know what will not be asked of you. Therefore, you should know everything. That's my recommendation. This is a good question. And we can kind of talk about it. What's up, Prof? This is from My Ride Dirt. You sure do. You say, best recommendations for getting a raise in HelpDesk. Well, HelpDesk obviously is concerned with kind of an entry level to IT. It's sort of one of the first types of jobs you might get when working in information technology. This is your foot in the door for your IT career, is getting a HelpDesk position. And generally speaking, this is not always the case, but let's talk in generalities. Generally speaking, you stay at the HelpDesk for 9 months, a year and a half. And then at that point, you move from the HelpDesk into something that's more specific, like operating systems, Linux, Windows administration, Active Directory, networking, security, databases, email, data centers, cloud computing. There's a lot of different areas of IT you can move into and start working in. And I think if you ask most HelpDesk managers, they'll tell you our goal is to get you familiar with our processes, familiar with our organization, understand some of the applications that are specific to our company and the processes, and then take that knowledge and move into a different part of the company where you can continue to learn and continue to get better. And so that's the problem you have with entry-level positions comes entry-level pay. And it's not always that great. And so the goal, and I've often said this in our study groups, the goal in IT is if you're interested in more revenue, you want to make more money, you want more flexibility in your position, and you want some additional opportunities for your career, you have to move up. You have to change your job. Sometimes that is moving within a different department in the same company. Sometimes that's moving to a different company. In fact, it's very common that your highest pay raises will almost always be when you're moving from one organization to a completely different company, because it's more competitive that way. When you're already working for the company, it's less competitive for you to move into that position. You're not fighting against other people. The rate isn't going up. You already work there. They know it. They know, the employer knows that it's much more difficult for you to move to a new company than it is to stay with the company that you're at. So they can perhaps not be as aggressive with the pay if they move you into a higher level position within the same company. Just sort of the nature of the beast. So it really comes down to, if you want to move up, if you want to make more money, you want to move out of the help desk. Help desk generally has a fee. You make a certain amount. There's a certain salary you would get, a certain amount per hour. And then maybe you can move up to one other level up. It's probably not a big increase in pay. Or maybe you can move into the management of help desk, but that's more like you chose help desk as your IT career, which isn't common either. Most people are moving out of help desk and into some other part of the company. So that's what I would recommend you do as well, is instead of worrying about getting a raise within the help desk, I would say your better move from a career perspective is to instead go into a different role, either within the same company or within a different company. Go to a different organization completely. That's what I would recommend. So that folks in the chat room still talking about the crossover cables and saying, hey, more switches these days can automatically determine whether you're using a crossover cable or not. Many of them can, but that's not always enabled. And secondly, it's not always the most optimal configuration. I have run into chipsets in Ethernet that perform worse when they have to internally cross over than when you're using the proper cable externally. So if you have the option to use the proper cable, I highly recommend you always use the most appropriate cable for the role. Having something automatically change it to crossover internally is not always the best way to do it. It's supposed to work that way. Does it work that way? Not always. It doesn't. So that's why I tell people don't rely on automation. When you start relying on it, you run into problems. Should we use automation? Absolutely. Should we rely on it? No. You should never rely on automation. And you never know if that crossover functionality, auto crossover, the auto index, you don't know if it's enabled, and if it is, if it's working the way you would expect. So the way that you avoid those problems is to use the right cable to begin with. Other questions. Let's go through this question list and find others that we have here. Now I'm back in the chat. Let's go back to our questions list. There we go. And other things that might be here. Other questions that are in here. This is a pretty good one. I think this is sort of a broader question, but we can kind of talk about the details of this. And this is from NJ, who asks, can you talk about burnout in IT and how you avoid/overcome it? This is something I think that everyone in IT has to deal with at some level at some point during their career, because different positions in IT have a different set of responsibilities that come with them. And not all organizations do a very good job at managing those responsibilities across the folks in IT. A really good example of this, I think, is the part where people are, they're working to on a 9-to-5 job. They work Monday through Friday, but on the nights and weekends, they're on call. And this is, I think, where most problems begin to occur. This is where most breakdowns start to happen, because you are constantly, if somebody is constantly on call, if you are the person in IT, there's nobody else working with you or nobody else that's able to be on call, and you get to be that person any time of the day, any time of the night, and you're the person that gets called, you can very quickly become very, very tired of this job. It will burn you out very, very quickly because you aren't managing your time at that point. Someone else is managing your time. And it's up to the person managing your time to know whether they should be calling you or not. And guess what? They always call you. They never think, should I really call? Of course I'm going to call them. And then they bother you, and then your entire weekend is now you're wrapped up doing something. You're on vacation. You're having to stop and pull out a laptop or a tablet to be able to solve a problem because no one else was able to do that for you. That's obviously not an optimal configuration. It's not an optimal setup. You should never be in that position. There should always be somebody to take the entire load and hand it to them for a night, for a weekend, and be able to switch off on some of these things. And not all jobs in IT are 24/7 jobs. You will run into people all the time that put themselves into these positions where they're killing themselves with work all the time because their time is not properly managed for them. Their manager should really be managing their time better, and they're not. Either intentionally or non-intentionally, the result is the same on you, is that you're having to do all of this. So I tell people when that happens, first, there's jobs out there where you don't work on the weekends. There's jobs out there where you don't work at night. They exist. They're real. And I've had them before. So I'm telling you, for someone who's been in the industry and been doing this, I have been in jobs where I've been on call and I've had to work overnights, and I've had to come in at 3 a.m, and I've had to come in on Thanksgiving and perform an update or an upgrade because that was the only time to do it. Was that fair? Probably not. But at the time, that was the situation we found ourselves in. There's really nothing more motivating, though, to get you out of those particular jobs than being in the job, because you realize, why am I doing this on a Thanksgiving? I should be with my family. It's the one time that nothing should be happening here. So let me see if I can change this position. And if you start looking around, you find very quickly, oh, here's a place to work that's a similar job, but there's 5 of us, and every week we change who gets the phone, who gets the call, so that you don't have to be on call 24/7. You're only called once every 5 weeks. That's much more reasonable. And at some point, like me, you may find a position where you don't work at night, where you don't work on the weekends. You won't get a phone call. You always have the weekends off. You always have the nights off. Those positions exist as well. Now, those aren't your entry-level positions. You tend to work into them, but that's why I tell you, every few years, you move into a different role, either within your own organization or within a different organization, not just because you're looking for more money, although you are. You would like to make more money if you make a move like that, but perhaps more importantly, you have more flexibility. You have better control of your time. And so folks that are burned out in IT, it's not an IT problem. It is a problem with the management of the organization where you work, because the same problem happens for people that repair construction equipment. The same thing happens for physicians. The same thing happens for people that are in manufacturing, on the manufacturing floor. Any job can burn you out, and IT is not somehow outside the scope of those situations. It's just part of a normal type of time management issue that you need to be responsible for. So if your time management is not being taken seriously by your employer, go find a different employer. There are a lot of good IT jobs out there. It's one of the great benefits of being in IT. That seems a little flippant when I say it that way. I don't mean to be, because that's an important move when you go from one job to another. But having your quality of life and your health is also important, and you need to take it seriously as well. If your employer isn't taking it seriously, you should be taking it seriously and go find somebody else who does that seriously as well. I think that's pretty important. Let's get some other questions. Let me keep going through the chat. Scroll. Lots going on in the questions. You folks are putting some great questions in here, by the way. I just want to thank you for that. Here's a good one. How is Professor Messer? No, what is Professor Messer? No, who is Professor Messer? I think how are we? We're okay. We're doing all right. Just had to check. We're doing good. How is I? How is me? Me is good. Things here are great. Loving it. What a good question. Thank you for asking. Let's do another question. Other things that are here. Well, this is another very broad question, but I think a good one we can talk about from Ralphosha X, who says, what sets me apart after taking the Security Plus exam? Well, first, let's assume you passed. So first, what sets you apart is you got certified. You are Security Plus certified. Not everyone is. But as we found in the industry, that's not good enough, especially if you're looking for an entry-level position. I talked about this at the beginning of the live stream in the pre-show, but I want to mention it now as well. As in the YouTube video description of this video, there is a link to my video of how to get a job in IT with no experience. Because I think that a lot of people believe that all they need to do is get a certification or get the A+ Network Plus Security Plus. They write up some type of resume, they send it in, and the job should be flowing in at that point. But it doesn't work that way. Getting a job in IT is still very competitive. And if you want to be better than the other people applying for this job, you need to have a better strategy. Certainly a better strategy than I'm just going to get certs, put together a resume, and just shotgun it out to everybody. That never works as efficiently as you think it probably will. It doesn't work, and you probably don't think it really works that well when you really think about it. So I tell people you need to do a number of things. You need to first make sure you have the proper degrees, formal education, make sure you have the proper industry certifications that the employer is looking for, do some significant hands-on practical experience. That may be setting up your own lab. It might be volunteering, but it's getting some type of practical experience with operating systems, with in the world of networking, with switches, with routers, with firewalls, setting those up and running them. Incredibly useful. Make sure you're familiar with those. But having some type of lab can really allow you to present a different face when you go into the interview, because now you have some knowledge that you can bring to the table. I talk about setting up a firewall, having it run at home, and then seeing what's in the logs after that week, probably after a day. You'll have incredible stuff in the logs that would be great to share in the middle of a conversation and an interview. Saying, oh, let me tell you about this, what I just did. I loaded up pfSense onto a Linux machine that I had in my lab. I connected it to my internet connection. You'll never believe what I saw coming through here. Look at this log information. There's a 15-minute conversation you can have. And it talks more about your knowledge of the technology and what you can do with it, instead of you saying, no, really, I'm good enough. No, really, I have some certs. I'm really good. I'm a people person. You know, that only goes so far in an interview. Having some type of practical knowledge and experience that you could show other people, especially if it's in the form of, you'll never believe what I saw. Look at this. Who wouldn't want to be part of that conversation? So I tell people all the time, it's not necessarily about just any one thing. It's not necessarily just about getting Security Plus. It's about what do you do with that knowledge and how do you prove to somebody else that you've used these technologies. I think having a home lab and working through that's also good. The fourth thing in that video, by the way, is you already know someone who works there. People don't think about this enough. People don't mention it enough, that knowing a person who is already in the organization who can vouch for you, who you can say, yeah, I know Larry in IT because I met him at the Cisco user group meeting and we talked all about routers and firewalls, and I know you guys are swapping your firewall out and you're doing this, and there's a big project going on, and I'd love to be part of that. Those are the conversations you have, and knowing someone who's there, knowing an employee who already works in the organization can be incredibly useful, because now there's a personal connection to the organization. Now you're not just some nobody who came off the street. Oh, you actually know people who work in this company, which means you know something about the company, which means that perhaps you would like to work here. So there's a nice layering effect of those four things. They're all in the video, How to Get a Job in IT with No Experience. It's in the YouTube video description of this video, and I would really recommend you have a look at it. Other questions? Let's keep going through this list. It's a big list, and I'm kind of throwing out. We'll go with the frequently asked questions in the study group. Hey, is that a green screen? No, that's my studio. Those are real. That's not a green screen back there. That's real stuff. And in previous videos, I've turned the lights off, lights back on. One of these times we'll run with no lights on the background. Can I turn them off now? I think I can, just to make the point, since you asked, and since I feel it's, I don't know, somehow important for me to do this. Let's turn one side of the lights off. Although technically, couldn't I just be showing you a video of me turning the lights off? So isn't that still the same thing as a green screen? Let's turn them all off. Everything goes off, and we'll just sit here. Very different view of the world when the background just disappears there. So no, it's a real background. It's so good that it just looks like a green screen. And we'll turn them back on. There we go. Click, and there's the back on again. So there, I'm glad we were able to get that one taken care of. Probably one of the most frequently asked questions we get in the study group. So important to have that there. I got to work with some of the lighting in here. There's more stuff I want to do. There's always something I want to do in the studio. If you want to see more about what runs the studio, it's on my website, professormesser.com/studio, or follow the studio link at the bottom of the homepage, and you can see more of how any of this stuff works. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of different buttons to push. There's a lot of different things in this room, so I try to document them on that page. Practical question from Team Random Noob, which I'm sure I'm part of the team, right? Would it be wise to go after CCNA after Network Plus? Well, I guess it depends on what you want to do in your career. CCNA, of course, is the Cisco Certified Network Associate, one of the more popular networking certifications in the industry. CCNA is well known. It is not an entry-level cert, however. It is a probably intermediate level, I guess you could call it. This intermediate level cert of CCNA is certainly more difficult than Network Plus. I don't think I'm speaking out of turn on that one. I think everybody would pretty much agree with that, because it is not an entry-level cert. It certainly is a intermediate level, and it requires a lot of knowledge of the command line of switches, routers, and other aspects of managing a Cisco-related environment. Because it is such a popular cert, though, a lot of employers like to see that if you're moving up into an intermediate level position. And I think this is really important to mention this at this point, because someone mentioned this, and I don't know if it was in my Discord or somewhere this past week, that they really didn't feel that overqualification was a problem when you're trying to get your first job in IT. And I really disagree with that. I really, as someone who is, or certainly was, I turned the wrong lights on in the front, someone who is or a former hiring manager in IT, I will tell you that it is super important that the person applying for the job match the requirements for the job as closely as possible. I think that's probably one of the most important things for the hiring manager to consider is this person really appropriate for this position? Let me give you an example. So somebody comes in and I'm hiring for a help desk position, entry-level position. I'm looking for someone to be able to take calls at the help desk, solve problems with people having issues with their keyboard and mouse, with logging into the network, with VPN connectivity, resetting passwords on Active Directory, things you would expect the first line of support to be able to handle at a help desk. And they come in on an interview and they have an A+ certification and a Network Plus certification. They have a 4-year degree, maybe a degree that is technical. Maybe it's not a 4-year technical degree. It doesn't matter that much from my perspective anyway. They show a competence in being able to understand these technical topics. We talk very casually about, tell me what you know about Active Directory. What's the process you would go through for resetting a password? If somebody called and said they had this type of problem, what would you do next? We can ask questions like that. And if they answer those questions, they're pretty good. I put them in the short list for this would be a good candidate for the help desk position. But let's say the next person who walks in, they have their A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus. They also went and got their CCNA. They also have an AWS certification, and they have a certification for Microsoft's server administration. We talked to them. They have extensive knowledge on using routers and switches, configuring VLANs on a switch. They know all about setting up spanning tree and what the different settings are for spanning tree. They've configured web servers. They've got a Linux machine that they use. I mean, there's just a wide range of things that suddenly show up in this interview. And I'm looking at their list of certifications and thinking they are going to be so bored being on this help desk and answering questions about, can I reset my password? Can you help me authenticate to the VPN? Probably not the best candidate, even though clearly their qualifications are much longer and larger than the first person who walked in. They really are not the best fit for this position. I would put the first person who came in at a higher level. I'd ask them if they wanted the job first before ever coming back, if ever, and seeing if that person who with the large number of certifications and experience would want a help desk position, because I really don't think they're going to last here more than a month. And then I'm going to have to go through this whole thing all over again. That is the challenge and really the reality of being overqualified for these types of positions. And you have to be very, very careful about that. I'm also going to promote another set of videos that I have also in this YouTube video description of 5 reasons your resume was rejected. And I have a follow-up to that, which is 5 more reasons your resume was rejected. And what I try to tell people when you start getting into the world of looking for these jobs is that your resume becomes so important because it's the first thing that an employer sees, and they make a decision based on what's on this piece of paper if they want to talk to you again. They want you to be on the phone or come into the office, or if maybe this is where they throw you out. Like they look at your resume and go, nope, not a chance. And maybe that's the one I did. I looked at this resume and they've got Cisco and Azure and AWS and Linux certs and all of these others thrown in. I'm probably going to say that's a hard no because they're well overqualified for this position. But in that set of videos on why your resume keeps getting rejected, and on the second one, I think is 5 more reasons, I talk about the importance of customizing your resume and customizing your cover page. First, a lot of people won't use a cover page. I don't know why. It's another chance for you to be better than the next person. And there are very easy ways to customize it. And there's great ways to customize it in a way that would make you more marketable. I'm not talking about a cover letter that says, thank you so much for considering me for this position. I really feel like I would be a good fit for your company. Sincerely, Professor Besser. That's not a cover letter. That's a waste of paper. A cover letter, and the one that I show you in my videos, is called a T-style cover letter. And it's one that shows you're looking for these capabilities in a person, and this is the capabilities I bring to the table. Look, it's a match. If you want somebody that knows this and this and this and this, I know this and this and this and this. And here's why, and here's the certifications, or here's what I did. That's your cover letter. And you can hand that cover letter to somebody, and before they've even got to your resume, you've repeated what they asked for in the job description, and you've listed in the cover letter the things where you meet it. I want to know more. Let's look at the second page. Let's look at your actual resume and see if this is a good fit. And your resume is also customized for the job description. Now, this customization, it sounds like it's something that'll take an hour for you to customize. In reality, it takes you about 5 minutes. 10 minutes if you go really long on the cover letter. We aren't talking about a huge investment here. So it's so important to be better than the next person in this job fight. It's a fight. It's a competition. You're trying to get a job. There's one job and a bunch of you are fighting for it. How can you be better than them without even walking into the room yet? Cover letter and the resume. In fact, let's say you're the person who has the Azure cert, you got CCNA, you've got Linux, you've got all these other certs, but in reality, you've never had an IT position yet. You're really looking for an entry-level cert. So this would be the time where on your resume, you don't talk about Cisco. Comes right off your resume. Don't talk about Azure. Comes off your resume. Now, if they bring it up in the interview, you can talk to some of those things, but I bet it won't because it's a help desk position. So in that scenario, I would take them off my resume completely as if I didn't even have them, because that's a better fit for the job that I'm applying for. That's an incredibly important nuance that I don't think a lot of people get. I think they believe that you can prove if you're the smartest one that you should get the job. That's not how jobs work. I wish it worked that way, but it doesn't. You have to find the right face, the right position to apply for that meets what's on your resume. There's have to be a match. And so match everything you can without overextending too much, and you'll have a better fit for the role that's being asked of you. And it may be the difference between you getting the job and you not getting the job, which can also be a pretty important thing to delineate. So that's why I tell people, get that, go get the cover letter piece that I have. It took me 10 minutes to customize it in the video. Shouldn't take you much more than that. And it's incredibly useful to be able to walk in with or send in a resume that perfectly matches the job. They should be able to look at your resume and go, this guy, it's like this guy was made for this job. It's like he has exactly what we're looking for to the letter. Can't do better than that. That's what you're shooting for. You never want them thinking, oh, he might be too overqualified. They might be too good for this job. That's a real thing, and you don't want to be that person. So don't. Other questions. That was all about getting your CCNA after Network Plus. To finish up that question, by the way, if you're planning to go into networking, you would like to be a network administrator, you would like to do switch administration, router administration, you'd like to plan, design, and engineer local and wide area network connectivity, then absolutely go get your CCNA. That's a perfect next step in your career. It's a lot of fun. I love doing networking. That's where I went in my career after desktop administration, after server administration. I went into networking. And I just loved working with protocol analyzers, looking at the data going over the network, kind of understanding more about what happens at the protocol level, troubleshooting problems with applications by looking at packet traces. It's a fantastic skill, and it's one that allowed me to take that knowledge and level up into IT security and become a cybersecurity engineer. So I was only able to do that because I got a foundational knowledge in operating systems and an expertise and foundational knowledge in networking, and used all of that to leverage into a role in security. And I think that's a very common path for many people that get into the world of IT security. I think that's a good way to move. If you're not planning to get into router administration, there's no way you plan on being a switch admin. CCNA obviously would probably not be the best choice. Instead, go get a certification where you're interested. If you'd like to be a Linux admin, go get a Linux cert. If you'd like to do cloud-based administration, go get a cloud certification. There's different things you can do, but find the thing that interests you today, go get a cert for that thing. It's not going to be something you do your entire career. IT doesn't work that way. We move around into different job roles and different things that we do constantly. And of course, the industry itself is changing under our feet every day. So it's always different. Whatever you're doing now, it's going to be very different 10 years from now. It'll go by in a second, and you'll realize, well, I've had 3 jobs and it's been 10 years and I started doing this one thing. Now I'm doing this very different thing. That's sort of the normal way we work in IT. That's how it works. So I would encourage you to follow a similar strategy for the things that you do with your career. Let's get more questions. And this is sort of a follow-up to that, which is a professor. It's from Idris, who says, I'm working an entry-level computer tech position. Is it still worth taking the A+, or should I continue getting work experience instead? Well, as my favorite commercial says, why don't we do both? That's one where it's probably in your current role, the A+ is unnecessary. You already have the job. The problem comes when you want to move up. You want to move into server admin. You want to move into workstation administration. You want to do Linux admin. You want to do networking or something else. You want to move to that next role. And if that happens, you want to be able to have options within your own company, but you might also want to have options outside of your company to move into a new role. And the people outside of your company, they don't know you. They've never met you. They don't know that what your entry-level computer tech position consists of. They don't know your day-to-day. They don't know your personal knowledge. They don't know you. So one of the things they may ask for in their job description is CompTIA A+ recommended or even required in the job description. Well, you have a similar experience. I would think working in an entry-level computer tech position, you stay there a year, you pretty much got all the knowledge you need to pass an A+ certification. Certainly a third party would understand that. No, they don't. They don't understand that at all. It says in the job description, CompTIA A+ required or CompTIA A+ recommended. They're looking for CompTIA A+. They are literally spelling it out for you. They are telling you word by word, letter by letter, you should have an A+. Not sure how much clearer this should be. That means that you need to go out and get your A+. Will it probably be easier for you to get your A+ than somebody who hasn't been through the experiences you've had as an admin? Yes, you're going to have a much easier time of it. In fact, you might be one of those people that study for 2 weeks, you study for a month, you go take the exam, both exams, and you're done. That might be you. And in that scenario, it probably doesn't gain you anything in your own company, but it gains you a lot for leverage if you need to go outside your company for a job. And eventually, even in the best scenarios, I've worked for, how many different companies have I worked for in my IT career? Let's start with, if I start in college, I worked for the college as a computer operator. I worked at AC3 Computers in South Miami, which was the computer provider for Metro-Dade County. So it was a computer store, but I was on the enterprise side. I was the one handling all of Metro-Dade County government for that. So that was a pretty decent tech job out of the gate. That was more of a field service tech. That was one company. Then I moved to an insurance company, John Alden Life Insurance, and that was a company in Miami. So I did insurance for 5 years. Then I went to work for a VAR, a value-added reseller that no longer exists, but they were in Hollywood. And that Hollywood, Florida, not Hollywood, the other one or two. Hollywood was another one. So that's 4 companies. I left there and started working for Network General. That's the 5th company. Network General was bought and sold. You know, we were bought by McAfee. We were sold off by McAfee. So I'm going to say the McAfee job was really the 6th company. When we were sold off, we became Network General again. So it's back to company number 5. I guess you can count it that way. But then Network General was bought by NetScout. That was a completely different company. Even though we were bought, the culture was very different. So I'm going to say that's the 7th company. And then from there, I went to work for Palo Alto Networks as a systems engineer. That was the 8th company. So in my career, I worked for functionally 8 different entities, not counting Messer Studios. But from third-party entities, I worked for 8 different companies in my IT career. It seems like a lot, but that's not unusual. That's relatively common. If you talk to people that were in the same level or same year of their career as me, they would have probably had similar stories. In fact, if you talk to anybody who's been in IT for 15 to 20 years, they probably have similar stories of how they got from point A to point B to point C to point D, and et cetera. So I think that's a good thing to consider if you're somebody who's trying to, if you're trying to decide, what do I do in this career? Should I really, and this is something that you deal with early on in your career, am I going to leave this company I'm in and go work for another company? It is a big decision because where you work now is a known entity. It's safe, or at least you know what you're getting. As they say, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know, but you're used to the devil that you're in. And is it a perfect place you're at? No place is perfect, but at least it's a place you know. It's kind of stressful and a bit of a jump into the unknown to move to a different company. Unless you really do your research, you know somebody who works there, there may be something that can help you along the way. But sometimes you make the jump without any type of knowledge. It's a blind jump and you're just hoping for the best. By the way, those don't usually work out very well in my personal experience. That never seems to work well. Only when I've done the research has it ever turned out okay. Maybe that's just a warning for you as you go through your career. Are we going to mess it up like Professor Messer did, or should we do a little more research on this one? So learn from my mistakes and do a little more research before you jump into the unknown. That's not a great place to be. So I really recommend thinking about that, though, because moving to another company is probably going to give you the most flexibility, or at least the more decisions you can make about that company is offering these benefits. The third-party company is offering different amount of pay, a better pay, more responsibility, but I have weekends off. Maybe that's all I need. Okay, I'm going. They said weekends off. Maybe that's your biggest pain point in your current position. So you move to the other company. You're making more money. 3 years there, you move to another company. 3 years there, you move to another company. It's a 3-year plan, and it's very common in IT. And it's almost expected at this point. Like, what are you still doing here 3 years later? Anytime you're in a position, by the way, where you come in the morning, you know everything. You know the processes, you know the procedures. When somebody asks a technical question, you know the answer. When somebody talks about a particular server that's having a problem in your central data center, you go, oh, that's server 2. It acts up all the time. You kick it down near or you duct tape the power cable in the back. We've been there, right? And pull the cable tight and it'll be fine. Or you have to adjust it. You have to... There's all these little idiosyncrasies that you know because you've been there for 3 years. If you're at the point where you're that comfortable, you're in the wrong job. Seems like it shouldn't be that way. Seems like now you know it. Why would you leave? You should leave because you're not learning anything. You're not making more money. There's a chance to move up. There's a chance to make more revenue. There's a chance that you can be in a more flexible job with better benefits. You just don't know it yet. So I tell people all the time, if you're very comfortable in your job, you're in the wrong job. You should be pushing yourself constantly in this industry, because the more you push yourself, the more you learn, the more you make those more strategic moves between jobs, the more money you're going to make, the more flexibility you're going to make, the more you're going to be able to provide for yourself and your family. There's a lot of benefits there. So I tell people, don't be worried about making jumps. You need to be worried about not making jumps. That's where I see people stagnating the most, is when they are just not willing to make that decision. And I saw it all the time when I went from company to company as a field service and as a systems engineer on the road. I met with hundreds and hundreds, over 1,000 companies, certainly, where I'd walk into their building and have a meeting with them. And I meet people at many different areas of IT, doing many different types of jobs in many different types of organizations. And you can very easily find the people that have just been there for 10 years and they're not going anywhere, but they're also not moving up and they're not learning more. In fact, those are the people that are usually, when you bring in new technology, and I was often bringing in new technology, they're looking at it as I'm a problem. I'm disrupting their already comfortable world. And that creates a number of conflicts. Shouldn't be that way, but it's human nature. And that's sort of the way it operates sometimes. And you kind of have to, as a systems engineer working for a manufacturer, I have to kind of feel the room out of who's there, what they're doing, how they fit into this project, and whether they're on board or not, because it will affect my ability to get my job done. So that's why I tell people all the time, if you're comfortable, you should be moving out or up. Quick, go. And it's not always to management. That's another thing that was posed to me. Somebody said, well, I don't want to be a manager. I don't want to be an IT manager. Don't. I thought I wanted to be an IT manager. I went into IT management. I was a systems engineer manager. Didn't really like it that much. It wasn't for me. You probably asked the people who worked for me. I was probably a bad manager. I tried to be a good manager, but it just wasn't something I was passionate about. I did the thing. I had the interviews and we did reviews and I did the scheduling and I did the things that I felt were necessary. I just didn't like the job, which is, I think, not unreasonable. It's a different job than somebody who's a technologist. So I went back to being a technologist. I thought that was a lot more fun. And ultimately that was the right decision for me, is to get out of management. And at that point, and this was relatively early on in my career, at that point, kind of halfway through my career, I decided, you know what, never going into management again. not my thing. I got just enough to know that wasn't what I liked to do. So now let's stick with technology. As it turns out, you can go higher, make more money, and have more flexibility as a technologist than you ever could as a manager. Who knew? So that's where I focused on from that point on. I just stuck with technology, and that worked out well for me. Other people that I've worked with in my career who were managers and that were good at it, I'm so glad I work with those people, because those are the ones we need as managers. You don't need me in a management role. We won't do that again. And I'm very sorry that ever happened. We won't make that happen. Let's get another question in. I know we're getting way past the top of the hour here, but let's get some more into this list and see what I can find. In our list of questions, this is a pretty good one. We'll talk about this one for just a second because I think it sort of fits into the questions we're doing right now about career. This is one that asks, I have a degree in computer science. I'm wondering if I need the cert, we'll talk Network Plus, I guess, to get a network admin job. Also, which certs can my degree mitigate for? You know, this is a sort of a problem when we talk about computer science degrees. This is the interesting part about, at least in the United States, our educational system at the higher level, at the college and university level. Let's just talk four-year universities. So that is what in the United States we have traditionally considered the four-year university to be the pinnacle of your formal knowledge. Once you get out of your high school, you graduate from your primary and secondary schools, you are now looking at getting this four-year degree at a university. The problem you will find as an IT person is that relatively few four-year universities offer any type of degrees associated with information technology. That is, they do not have degrees that have anything to do with understanding Windows, managing Linux, understanding networking, understanding security at the IT level. They don't have degrees on that. If you talk to an educator or an administrator at one of these four-year universities, they will tell you, because they are a place of learning, they are not a place of training. And so they feel that the IT role is one that is thoroughly beneath the role of a four-year university. How ridiculous. This is probably one of the few areas of jobs that you could get in the world that will pay more than any other in any of those other positions at a university. And maybe at a university, you've got lawyers, you've got people getting doctors, medical doctors. What other? Maybe high-end engineering of nuclear engineering or electrical engineering. Maybe there's some jobs at that level that pay even more than IT. But I will tell you, in IT, I very easily can make more than a doctor or a lawyer. So this is the challenge you have, is that here's this opportunity with IT that can give me financial stability, and here's a four-year university that won't even teach it. Now, not all four-year universities are this way, by the way. There are a couple out there that are finally coming along, but four-year universities don't move fast for anything. So it's sort of a slow go. And in fact, if you look at the information technology offerings from some four-year universities, it's really wrapped up in computer science. They want to teach you a bunch of programming, which we don't do in IT. IT doesn't do programming. We do scripting. We do automation. We're not programmers. We don't build hardware. We don't write applications. So that's really the difference between computer science, which practically every four-year university offers, and IT, which relatively no four-year universities offer, relatively speaking. And so there's your problem, is that a lot of people will go into a university and get a computer science degree because, quite honestly, it's all they offer from a technical level. If you want to prove you're technical, that's the only one they give. So that's the one you'll take. And what you do is you end up learning programming for 2 years, and you come out of school with no IT knowledge at all. You don't know how to install Windows. You've never managed or done any troubleshooting in Linux. You've never looked at a network packet. You have no idea what IT security brings to the table. So that's your challenge if you're somebody who has a degree in CompTIA and you are looking at a job in network administration. Perfectly normal, by the way, because you didn't have a choice. You needed to get a technical degree, so you went and got computer science. Now you want to get a job that has nothing to do with your degree in IT. Happens all the time. That part's completely normal to me. So your question was, should I go get a Network Plus? You should absolutely get a Network Plus. No question. Because you are less qualified for that role than somebody who may have gone to community college and gotten a 2-year degree with that included A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus certifications, which a lot of 2-year community colleges offer these days. Community colleges are crushing it when it comes to IT training compared to the 4-year universities, by the way. I am someone who graduated from my local community college and then went to my local university. My degree was in business management. They did offer computer science, but I looked through the computer science they offered and said, why do I need to learn programming? That's not what I want to do. I want to do IT. And I instead went to business management. Turns out neither one of those roles really helped me very much in IT, I guess until now. When you manage your own company, it's a little different. But that's one of those situations where if you went and got a computer science degree, you need to now prove to someone that you're smart technically, but you also need some type of IT that you can roll into your base of credentials. And I think getting Network Plus is a pretty good one to get if you want to roll that into your credentials. So that's why it's kind of an odd thing. IT is it's difficult to get a 4-year degree in IT because they just aren't offered. So it makes sense to get a 4-year degree in computer science, but now you have to fill in those gaps that are missing on your resume, and getting an IT certification certainly fills in those gaps. And in my opinion, it certainly does. So that's what I would recommend too. If you're working through that, computer science is just sort of works that way. That's sort of a challenge. It's kind of disappointing sometimes. I just went through the process with I have 3 kids. My third just started his technical degree, and we had to really look around to find an organization where getting a technical IT degree was going to give him the skills and knowledge he needed to get an IT job right out of college. And it's difficult to find one of those. I did find one at one private 4-year college in Florida. I found another private school in Florida, a college in Florida that offered IT degrees. And finally, we've gone to a third. It's more of a public-private configuration. It's very hard to find. You have to really do a lot of research. And I think that's why I really emphasize to people to continue your path of learning, continue your path of constantly being interested and curious about the way these technologies work together, because the more you spend time learning and understanding what is happening under the surface with all of these technologies, the more flexibility you're going to have for moving up in your career, the faster you will move up in your career, the smarter you'll be, and it will be easier for you to understand newer technologies, because effectively we bundle these around with others. But it's quite a challenge sometimes to find the perfect fit. But keep looking, keep working, and then once you get your degree, you're not done. You have to constantly be learning the latest technologies in your job. You will always, always, always be watching, learning, reading, certifying, and learning new things all the time. It never ends in IT, and for good reason, because the entire universe of technology is constantly evolving under our feet. We have to stay up to date with everything that's going on. So I hope that gives you some perspective. I think some of you in the chat room were even mentioning, yeah, that's exactly the way the universities work. That's how they do things. We just have to work with it or around it or through it or in spite of it. In any case, hopefully maybe that's given you some ideas of things you can do to kind of work around some of the things that you've run into with technology. Maybe that can help you too with a lot that we find ourselves with today, with the job market the way it is, with the cyclical nature of hiring and not hiring. You need to be ready for anything. You need to prepare yourself, and that preparation is constant. And it's one you'll be doing throughout your entire career. Well, I think that's a great place to stop. Thank you so much for being here in our first hour of Q&A. Thank you for joining us for our after show. Keep in mind that if you want to do this again, we're doing a Security Plus study group next week at this time. We'd love for you to join us live again and participate with our brand new questions. And of course, we have an after show for that one as well. If you want to know more about our Security Plus course, feel free to check out our website at professormesser.com. If you like this video, we'd love it if you could give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, you should do that already. It's a great place to see the latest things that are happening. And of course, you'll be informed every time we start one of these live events. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group. Thanks, everybody.